What's going on, everybody? This is Benjamin Baktroy bringing you another F1 2021 video. This video is going to be focused on this week's weekly event, which is an overtaking challenge at Bahrain, where you'll be playing as Sergio Perez, looking to ultimately win the race. I think you have about 13 or 14 laps or so to achieve that goal. And this is just my attempt at 95 AI. Yeah, it's kind of pretty poor. This is the setup that I use. Pretty much it's a time trial setup on PC that the esports guys and the guys at the top of the time trial list use. I did switch between 6.9 and 7.9 wings, but I think this run is ultimately 6.9 wings. So a little pause here just because my phone rang. We're having a tropical storm this weekend where I live, so I got a notification from my electric company. But as you can see right there, starting lap 44 of 57, you are Sergio Perez in P7. And again, this is at 95 AI just because the weekly events where you have to overtake cars are a little bit more difficult this year than they were last year. So I can usually win in a Mercedes at 105 AI level, but for some reason with the weekly events, it's really tough, especially in a slower car in the Red Bull. But even in the Red Bull, you should be able to get to within Stroll's DRS within the first lap. As you can see right here, we are at 1.3 seconds behind as my cat walks in front of the screen, so I can't see anything. Thank you, buddy. 1.3 seconds behind, 1.5 seconds behind now after turn 10 on this DRS straight. And again, it's really easy to get into Stroll's DRS here. I'm pretty sure I get into it here, but sometimes I don't get into his DRS for the first straight. But you should have enough pace to be able to catch up to him by turns 1 and 2, so where you can get DRS in the following sectors. But as you can see, we are about 9/10 behind him, closing up a little bit more now, coming out of the final corner, and we do get DRS here. It's not totally necessary, as we've set the fastest lap. It's not totally necessary to get into his DRS, as Stroll and Ocon do end up battling further on into the race. I think a couple more laps, but it's just nice to get into the DRS right away so that you can start saving ERS for later on in the race. So I'm not going to make too many cuts just so you can kind of see everything that's going on now. Just be careful going into this turns 4, 5, and 6 on lap 45 as everybody starts catching up to Mazepin there. And he will get in your way if you catch up to him at the wrong moment. But we navigate our way through Mazepin there and just keep on tailing Ocon and Stroll. I know some of you guys might be looking at the map and thinking, how are you supposed to catch up and win this race? But you'll see a couple cars end up pitting during the race. I think Alonso ends up pitting at the end of this lap, either at the end of this lap or the end of next lap. So that's one free position. And then the two Mercedes end up pitting as well for new soft tires. So that's 3 positions that you really don't have to worry about. So ultimately now you're just focusing on Stroll, Ocon in P5, and Ricardo up in P3. You can't really see him on the timing charts yet as Alonso jumps into the pit there. And then you pretty much don't have to worry about Alonso for the rest of the race. Even though he does go on to fresher tires, he's in an Alpine and they just don't have the pace to really stay in this race. So still continuing to just follow Stroll and Ocon right here. Not really worth it to try and pass Stroll right now just because you'll be wasting a lot of ERS trying to get out in front of him, and he's going to be in Ocon's DRS anyway. There were 1 or 2 races where I started battling with Stroll early on in the race and he fell outside of Ocon's DRS, so it was pretty easy to pass him. But Stroll is quicker than Ocon on track anyway, so there's really no point in fighting for these positions so early on. I would recommend, or at least this is what I did. I just stayed behind these two for a few laps, and once they start battling, there's going to be more opportunities for you to overtake the both of them at the same time later on. So wasting all your ERS right now to try and get out in front of them early on is kind of pointless. And Ricardo does He has a little bit of pace right now, but he does start slowing down just because he's on medium tires, and they start wearing out much quicker than your hard compound tires towards the later part of the race. So again, really just be patient in this event this week. You have plenty of laps to make up time. There's really no strategic value to battling these guys, wasting your ERS, and then getting out in front of them early on anyway, just because you'll need it towards the end, as both Hamilton and Bottas on fresh soft tires are going to be fighting up through the grid. And this is the moment that I'm talking about here. If you take a good line, you should be able to overtake both Ocon and Stroll right there, because that battle into turns 1 and 2 happened so many times while I was playing. I mean, I know that these weekly events are scripted, but that battle going into turn 2 happens a lot. So you should be able to overtake Stroll and Ocon at the same time there. I didn't happen to get in front of Stroll at that moment, but you should be able to get the both of them going into turn 4. So like I said, just be patient for the first 3 laps or so, and then wait for them to start battling and then overtake them. And that way, as you can see right now, I still have over 50% ERS left, and should be more than enough. You can get out in front of Stroll right now, but he will, I mean, with my skill level anyway, he was still able to stay within my DRS for quite a few laps. So I decided on this run to just stick behind Stroll for a little while, take advantage of the DRS, harness a little bit more ERS, and then that way I don't have to worry about somebody behind me constantly trying to fight, and then having to waste time defending against Stroll here. So now you can see Ricciardo is about 7 seconds out in front of you. There is a lot of traffic between Stroll and Hamilton though, so don't panic. They are going to slow down in the end, and it shouldn't be too difficult. For some reason, this race was a little bit different than some of the previous races that I ran. As you'll see later on, it was easier to catch up to Ricciardo in this race than I normally did in my previous attempts, as it usually took me until about lap 54 to catch up to Ricciardo, but I catch up to him a little bit earlier in this race. So even though it is scripted, there are still, there's still room for things to happen, and some variables to be thrown into the race that make it a little bit more difficult or a little bit more easy, depending on what kind of RNG you get. But still, lap 48 here, going on to lap 49, still sticking behind Stroll. He is on medium compound tires. I'm not sure how old they are, as Stroll is on the mediums and you're on the hards as soon as this event starts. So I think you start off at about 20% tire wear on the hards, I'm pretty sure. And then as you go into the race, Stroll will get slower and slower. And this is the time that I decide to kind of get out in front of him. So Ricciardo right now is... Oh, did I miss? Oh, yeah, we missed Bottas jumping into the pits on lap 49. And he always jumps into the pits, so you don't have to worry about Bottas not pitting at all. Every single time I ran this event, which is probably maybe about a dozen times or so by now, Bottas jumps into the pit at around lap 49. So you don't have to worry about him at the moment, but he does start charging through the field later on, and towards the end of the race, last couple laps, you will have to worry about him. But for right now, really just focusing on catching up to Ricciardo on the mini-map. I think he's just gotten out in front of the 2 back markers. I think that's Schumacher and Raikkonen out in front between you and Ricciardo right now. So I don't know why, but for whatever reason, I always try to catch up to them and get DRS off of them, but I always caught up to them right before we hit the DRS detection line, and they always end up just slowing down and let me pass right before the detection line. So that was kind of a pain in the ass, but it's easy to catch up to those guys. And as you can see, we've already made up a little bit of time on Ricciardo. We're about 4.5 seconds behind him now. Again, for some reason, it was easier to catch up to him in this race than it was in previous races, as Hamilton jumps into the pit. I don't know if you heard earlier, but Jeff comes up over the radio and says Hamilton is having some car issues, so he pits for brand new softs as we set the fastest lap right now on lap 50, which definitely isn't gonna stand just because the two Mercedes are on soft tires. So I'm sure if you're Jarno Opmeer, you can probably set the fastest lap on really old hard compound tires, but there was no way in hell that I was going to set the fastest lap and then keep that fastest lap until the end of the race. So right now, as you can see, 3.5 seconds now behind Ricciardo, and I don't know if maybe he got some damage or something like that in this run, but he's not really pulling away from Schumacher and Raikkonen in front. So it was a lot easier to catch up to him and get within his DRS. And then these two back markers shouldn't be too much of an issue. They'll pull over and get out of your way as soon as you get within, I think, a second of them. There were times where Schumacher, for some reason, decided to slow down midway through a corner, and then I ended up crashing into him and then having to restart the race. But other than that, should be pretty simple. So Hamilton right now, 11 seconds behind. Again, I'm not really sure what happened in this race, as it's usually Hamilton that starts threatening from behind towards the end of the race. And he is in front of Bottas right now, but I think something happens in this race as we get by Schumacher and are about 2 seconds behind Ricciardo right now. But yeah, anyway, something happens. I'll have to watch the mini-map and see if something happens here. And Bottas ends up getting out in front of Hamilton, and then it's Bottas that starts attacking us towards the end. But either way, whatever happens, there's going to be one Mercedes that's coming after you. So try and save up as much of your ERS as possible, as I think it's the last 2 or 3 laps the Mercs start really attacking, and then all your hard work kind of goes out the window. The attempt previous to the one that you're watching right now, I literally got to this corner, turn 10, on lap 57, and Hamilton drove into me, and then Bottas ended up passing me and ultimately winning the race and making me fail this challenge. But I had a little bit better luck on this attempt right now. And yeah, you can see Ricciardo starting to slow down, a little under a second and a half right now. And getting closer to second, I put on the overtake to try to get him within the DRS, but the McLaren is pretty quick with straight line speed, so it was pretty difficult for me to do so. But his tires are starting to go off. As you can see, he has a pretty bad exit, even though we were 1.2, 1.3 seconds behind at the final turn. We get better traction out of that corner and end up making up some time on him down that straight. So now you're within DRS of Ricciardo, and it's pretty easy sailing. So depending on how far back the Mercedes are, you can kind of adjust your strategy to that. I noticed that it was Bottas out in front and not Hamilton, and Bottas is 8 seconds behind. Even on softs, 9 seconds is kind of a lot of time to try and make up in 5 or so laps at 95 AI difficulty. So I decided to just sit behind Ricciardo for as long as I could before the Mercedes started getting closer and closer, and try to save up as much ERS as possible to have to defend against them at the end of the race. So one more car out in front. I think that's Giovinazzi out in front of Ricciardo. Should slow him down a little bit, but not too much with the dirty air, and then he should slow down on this straight right here so that Ricciardo doesn't get DRS. But even if he does, like I said, he's on medium compound tires that are starting to wear down, and you're on better hard compound tires at this stage of the race. So even if Ricciardo does get DRS, which I think he does right here, it really shouldn't do much for him, because you're so close to him anyway. At least I am right now. And Giovinazzi stays out of the way for the both of us, which makes it nice and easy. Ricciardo gingerly going through turn 1 there, as his grip is starting to his tires are starting to lose grip. And then again, still just staying behind him, trying not to use any ERS at all. maybe just a little bit to try and stay close to him, but he shouldn't be able to stray too far out in front of you at this point. So now that I noticed that Bottas is at about 5 seconds behind, I'm thinking I probably should start getting a move on. But there are 2 cars behind us. Bottas still has to get out in front of Ocon and Stroll. And then hopefully by the time he does that, we're out in front of Danny Rick here. And there's 1 more car that he has to get out in front of. And he's still not within DRS of Ocon right now anyway. So it should still be another maybe half a lap or a lap before he gets out in front. And then maybe another 2 or 3 laps before you really have to start worrying about defending against Bottas. But right here I make the decision to make the move on Ricciardo. Having 1 more car between me and the Mercedes makes me feel a little bit safer on track. I did think about maybe keeping Ricciardo within my DRS just so that it was a little bit more difficult for Bottas to get by me, but as you can see down the straight right now and going into the second DRS straight here, he still hasn't gotten by Ocon, so maybe Valtteri and Lewis got into some contact and it's made their cars a little bit slower, but usually by lap 54 there's a Mercedes right on my tail, like maybe about a second and a half behind me. So this is a little bit odd. This doesn't happen every single race. I kind of lucked out in this particular race right here. There's usually a Mercedes right behind Ricciardo, and then it's not difficult for them to get by Ricciardo at all. And then within a lap or so, they're right on your tail, and hopefully you have enough ERS to fend them off. But now that I've noticed that Bottas is still in P5, there are still 3 cars between us, and there's only about maybe 3 or so laps left in this race. I kind of start taking it a little bit easy, not using any overtake still, as I'm still not sure what might happen in the last few laps here. And I think Valtteri is like right in front of Lewis, so you might not be able to see it on the minimap as they're really close together, but I think Lewis Hamilton is he just popped up on the time charts there. So the 2 Mercedes are bumper to bumper on track right now. And I think at the end, Hamilton does get out in front of Bottas, but for now they're battling for the middle points positions. So this should be a pretty easy end to the race. But like I said before, this was a weird one. I was expecting to be battling the Mercedes by lap 55, and they're still P5, P6, fighting against the Alpine. So yeah, Bottas has made his way up to P3 right now, but don't take this race as what normally happens in this challenge. I'm sure if you've already tried it, you know that the Mercedes are usually on your tail by now. I don't really know what happened here, but it makes my life a little bit easier. So right now, really just driving as carefully as I can. I hate being on worn out hard compound tires just because they have the lowest grip out of any of the tires, and the threshold for making mistakes is very small with these tires once they get to this point in the race. I think they're at about 35% wear, but even on fresh hard tires, I have to drive really carefully just because I don't like the way the cars feel on hard compound tires. They're really on edge. The car's really on edge, and it doesn't take much to make a mistake. So if you're wondering why I'm driving like a grandma here, well, I mean, I guess I do kind of drive like a grandma anyway throughout this whole thing, but even more like a grandma at the end here. It's because I don't want to make a mistake, as this is probably one of my better runs, and I had a little bit of good fortune in this race where I'm 2 seconds ahead of the next closest car, and it's really just easy sailing towards the end of the race. So I'm sure I could have gotten some more points if I'd got moving in these last couple laps, but I've already set a high score at 95 AI difficulty anyway, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to beat it on this run. So I just wanted to finish this safely just to have video of it, because I didn't record my best run at this challenge here. So I just wanted to make sure that I finished this race in P1 to let you guys see kind of how I handled this challenge. So now coming on the final lap, Valtteri does eventually get out into P2, but he's 3 seconds back right now. Ricciardo's still in his DRS. I imagine they're going to be battling through at least the next 2 DRS zones, so I don't see Valtteri getting out in front as Daniel overtakes him, and then Hamilton overtakes him, and so they're battling now. So at this point, it's really safe to say that we're probably going to win this as long as we don't make any major mistakes. And as you can see, I'm driving really slowly, so mistakes probably aren't going to happen, but you never know anyway. But yeah, this is a really fun challenge. Last week's was okay. I don't like racing in the rain. I think it was the Alfa Romeo Raikkonen car in the rain at Australia, and I really didn't have much fun with that, so I didn't bother making a video. But this one was fun. Bahrain is one of my stronger tracks without the racing line, so I figured I'd do okay on this challenge. And yeah, I think I accomplished the objective most of the time at 95 difficulty. There were some times where I made mistakes and crashed out, but for the most part at 95 this was pretty doable for me. I tried it at 100 difficulty, and I was still probably maybe 2 seconds off. I was always finishing 2 or 3 seconds behind Hamilton at the end of the race. So 100 AI is still a little bit out of my reach on these weekly events, but 95 is okay. And I think my highest score as of Friday was good enough for 115th on the ranking chart. So, or at least it's 115 counting the hackers. I know at least the top 3 guys, I'm pretty sure, are hackers. I know 2 of those guys are up there every week with times that are like 20 seconds faster than everybody else, which is pretty much impossible. But yeah, this was a fun event. I enjoyed racing this event quite a few times, and hopefully, you know, if there's still some time left in the weekend by the time you guys see this, it will help you out as well. But thank you for checking the video out. Remember to eat your bok choy. If you think I've earned it, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.